The targets are dwindling, and Washington's Kalen DeBoer might be Alabama's top target right now to replace Nick Saban.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source. One last time to stay up to date with our media rights free and Pac-12 dominated and beloved Conference of Champions before we make the switch to Locked On College Football starting on Monday. It'll be right here on this channel wherever you listen to or watch this show. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review, please. And thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So a lot has transpired over the last 24 hours. There was an entire saga of Dan Lanning is in Tuscaloosa when it turns out he was watching Jason Bourne with his kids in Eugene. There was a little bit more momentum on the Steve Sarkisian front, which I was really confused about. I was confused why there wasn't more momentum to go get Steve Sarkisian. He has now made it clear that he is going to stay at Texas. Quinn Ewers is coming back, and Texas is also, as I'll talk about later, a top-tier job in all of college football. So the Bama coaching search continues, and Kalen DeBoer is a name that continues to be thrown around. Take this for whatever it's worth, because once upon a time, Dan Lanning was a minus odds betting favorite to be the next Alabama head coach. I think that's because Alabama had him as their top target. He has decided to stay with the Ducks, and Kalen DeBoer has been the betting favorite to be the next head coach at Alabama. That doesn't make him the only option. This is not all doom and gloom for Husky fans as they attempt to retain their head coach. But I don't know who else the top targets would be. I don't know who else would be at the top of the list. If you were to go, even think outside the box here. Okay, Bill Belichick is not coaching in college. Jim Harbaugh would not leave Michigan for Bama. He would leave Michigan for the NFL. I've seen Mike Vrabel's name a couple times. Does that sound right? Alabama head coach Mike Vrabel? I don't know. I think Vrabel's a good coach, but I think he's someone who is going to be able to land a head coaching opportunity in the NFL. So I don't know that he would come down to college and decide he wants to deal with recruiting. Maybe he does, but I don't suspect that that would be the case. So as you just go through the list of targets with Lanning saying, nope, I am staying at Oregon, and Steve Sarkisian saying, nope, I'm staying at Texas. Lane Kiffin is a name that I would think has to be in the mix. He's been Alabama's offensive coordinator. They didn't end on the best of terms when he left to go be the head coach at FAU. He's done a really good job at Ole Miss over the last couple of seasons. I have heard no buzz whatsoever, which means I assume he's not going anywhere. Brian Kelly at LSU would not be an option for the Crimson Tide, and LSU's also got the money to continue to pay him. He's paid very well, and I haven't heard his name even a single time. I might be the first person I know of that's bringing it up. So as you just look around, the options are just kind of pretty thin. Now, Kiffin is, potentially still an option. I just don't know I don't know how that ended. I don't have inside information as to how it ended there between Lane Kiffin and Alabama, but I do know that Kalen DeBoer has not come out and made an emphatic statement the way that Sarkisian has, the way that Lanning did, to say, I am going to be Washington's head coach. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere, and do his own version of, a Jordan Belfort of I'm not leaving, which is an amazing scene in quite the film, to say the least. But I think that for DeBoer, this is something he's clearly considering. It is strange. There is an element to it that is strange, because not only does he not have any ties to Alabama, he doesn't have any ties to the SEC. And for many, many years, this is why, though I understand why DeBoer would be a target, because he's a fantastic coach. I mean, the guy wins everywhere he goes. Indiana OC, he won. They were in the top 15. Sioux Falls, 3 national championships. Fresno State, 10-win season. Washington, 25-3. This guy just wins football games. So from that standpoint, it certainly makes sense. But the SEC, and I think Pac-12 fans listening to or watching the show are well aware of this, the SEC has always had their own way of doing things that has oftentimes been different from the rest of the country. Pushing the envelope. It just means more. Passion that sometimes boils over into insanity from fans and whatnot. DeBoer, having never been a coach anywhere near there. I mean, Indiana's the closest he's been a head coach. That's the closest you get to the South. That's a different ball game there. So that's why, even though from a football standpoint, yeah, DeBoer's a head coach, I think he would go there and be able to win. He hasn't coached in the SEC before, or even around the SEC. And he's also not a big recruiter. And that matters a great deal to Alabama. The argument can readily be made that Kalen DeBoer doesn't have to be a mega recruiter. The brand of Alabama and what Nick Saban has done will do the recruiting for him. I can see that. And in the age of the transfer portal, high school recruiting, and putting your head down on your desk until someone drags you away or you fall asleep on that desk to push for a high school recruiting class that's as high as possible, it might not matter as much in today's world of college football because you can get players out of the transfer portal. Though that is de facto an element of recruiting, not as if DeBoer has struggled with that part of it in particular. But on the high school front, the recruiting results have not been great. Is that a knock against him? Is that part of the disconnect I'm talking about between DeBoer and his coaching track and going down and being in the SEC? That's up to Greg Byrne, the athletic director down at Alabama. I think DeBoer is a fantastic coach, would absolutely win there. It just doesn't quite sound or feel right. Then again, Brian Kelly went from Cincinnati to Notre Dame to LSU. So it has happened before. And all Brian Kelly's ever done in his career was win football games. And there was this question about, well, does he fit? Is he a fit down there? He's faking a Southern accent. I don't think DeBoer would fake a Southern accent down there. But does he really fit? Does he have that SEC sort of pedigree? Well, last time I checked, he won 10 games this year. I think they won 10 games last year as well and played in the SEC title game. So he's won 20 games in 2 seasons. I'd say he's doing pretty darn well. I think the fit is clearly good enough because they just had a Heisman Trophy winner and they've won 10 games or more. I don't remember if they won 11 the season prior because I haven't started covering that area of the sport yet. But as I mentioned earlier, that changes starting Monday when this becomes Locked On College Football. A question about that came in from one of you that I will answer later as to what that show is going to look like because this is indeed the final episode of Locked On Pac-12. But I digress. I think that for Kalen DeBoer, there is a pretty strong case to stay at Washington. Chris Peterson has showed that if you are the right coach at the University of Washington, you can win at a high level for a long time. And DeBoer over the last 2 years, I think, has learned that firsthand. And the question he has to answer is, do I want to go to a place that is culturally different, that's got even higher expectations, where all the attention in the world is going to be on me, whereas Washington sometimes struggles to get the attention they sometimes deserve over the course of a college football season? Do I want to change that profile for me as a head coach? I don't know the answer to that. That's the question that he's got to answer for himself. But I think that he could be the top target right now for Alabama because the other options have just kind of got up in smoke. They've gone away. I don't know who's left on the short list. If the short list coming out of Nick Saban's retirement was Dan Lanning, and then number 2 was Steve Sarkisian, and then another one was maybe, I don't know. Like DeBoer was always kind of one of the top 3 names to be considered for the job. James Franklin, Mike Norvell at Florida State. That's a name that I could absolutely see. His buyout doesn't cost very much. Here's why I don't suspect that will be an obstacle, or why that won't be a reason why Mike Norvell gets hired at Alabama. Here's a reason you should go check out FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapped up, but guess what? The playoffs are about to start, and there's still time to get on the action because right now new customers get $150 $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. You just have to place it. You don't actually have to win. You don't actually have to be sharp. You could be dull as a doorknob. And guess what? You place that $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. It's that simple. The app is super easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. You can do all those things, and you can do much, much more. They got everything you need, college football, NFL, NBA. It's all over there at FanDuel. Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. Just do it. It's that simple. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Say this out loud with me. Mike Norvell will be Alabama's next head coach because he's the cheapest option. Doesn't sound right, does it? Now, Mike Norvell appears to be a good football coach. That much is clear. That's a guy who, coaching at Florida State, has certainly got a greater tie to that part of the country than Kalen DeBoer does, for whatever that is worth to the University of Alabama as they seek to replace, the greatest coach in the history of the sport. But that won't be the reason. Like all the buyout factors, Dan Lanning's buyout was the biggest of any of them at $20 million. And Bruce Feldman, said on a podcast that it was actually more than that because of the way it was structured. I don't think money is going to be an obstacle here for Alabama. When have they ever gone cheap on, anything with regards to football? Do they feel like they're behind the times in NIL? Do they not have a state-of-the-art stadium? Do they not have good uniforms? Do they not have nice facilities? This is Alabama we're talking about. They've got plenty of cash. So I think it's going to come down to who they think is the best candidate available. Now, on the one hand, that could be Kalen DeBoer. On the other hand, they might look and say, I don't know, Brian Harsin came from the West Coast to the SEC, and, Auburn fans and alumni and donors kind of rejected him immediately, and it didn't go well on the field in addition to that. So that was a very ugly 2-year stint. They've hired Hugh Freeze, appear to be headed maybe back in the right direction down there in Birmingham. But I think that for Alabama, for Dabo Swinney's name to be thrown around consistently is more than a little intriguing, because here's a guy who feels like he's having the sport pass him by, like Jack Sparrow. I love those moments. I love to wave at them as they pass by. Okay, the moments would be Dabo Swinney, and Jack Sparrow is college football. Just waving. Bye. You don't want to do NIL? You don't want to do portal? Okay. We'll see you later. It happens to everybody. Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, they've retired. Greg Popovich probably needs to. The Spurs are a disaster. It happens to everybody. Now, Dabo is not that old, and Dabo could be more adaptable. And if you're talking about a guy that, fits the University of Alabama, yeah, Dabo Swinney fits that description a heck of a lot more than Kalen DeBoer. But those are the only two names right now, along with Mike Norvell. I don't think James Franklin at Penn State is going to be the option. I think that Dabo and Kalen DeBoer are the two names that I'm most intrigued to see, because in terms of the process of who Alabama is going to pursue as their next head coach, I think we're going to know by the time Locked On College Football rolls around on Monday. I think we are going to know whether or not Kalen DeBoer will be Washington's head coach, whether Jim Harbaugh will be Michigan's head coach, and who will be Alabama's head coach. That's just a gut feeling here. And I think that for Alabama, it's such a monumental decision. And I know I'm not breaking any news there, but to be a place whose hire impacts other teams and their hires, and also will have ramifications as to what standard could be set at the school post Nick Saban. It's just, you can't undersell the importance of this particular move. So I could see DeBoer from a football standpoint. From a fit standpoint, Dabo Swinney would be the answer out there. But maybe Alabama has got an ace up their sleeve, and we don't know what's going to happen. Some of the biggest stories in sports, some of the biggest moves in sports have come out of nowhere. They have. Kevin Durant is signing with who? The Warriors? Wait, whoa. Back up. He's doing what? Wait, LeBron's going to the Heat? He's going to the Heat. And Chris Bosh is going to the... Whoa. You just don't know sometimes. But I think this is going to all play out very, very soon. All right. I've got a bunch of mailbag questions to answer on this, the final episode of Locked On Pac-12. This question came in from Greg. What are the 10 best jobs in college football? Now, this is particularly appropriate to discuss at a time in which the coaching carousel is a red-hot topic in this beloved sport, the greatest one in the world, that being college football, of course. Now, when I sat down and thought about the 10 best jobs in college football, I thought about brand power, I thought about resources, I thought about expectations as well as it pertains to what is afforded to you. For example, I've heard Josh Pate before, I think correctly, describe Auburn as one of the worst jobs in all of college football. Well, they've got a bunch of money there, and they've got resources. That's true. They're the number 2 program in their own state. And Auburn fans and alumni and boosters expect to compete at the sort of level that Alabama is at regularly, and that the expectations don't always match the reality for the program. So that can be a very difficult job. I mean, they fired Gus Malzahn, who is now the head coach at UCF, the only newcomer from the G5 moving into the Big 12 this year that made a bowl game this season. They fired Gus Malzahn, and he had a pretty darn good record whilst at Auburn, but they thought they should be achieving another gear. So all these factors come into play. How well you are able to do there, what kind of the ceiling is, the resources you've got, the expectations, everything like that. At the top of my list of the 10 best jobs in college football is absolutely the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, this is even considering that the greatest coach in the history of the sport has decided to retire, and someone's going to have to fill his shoes. There is no stronger brand than Alabama. You're right in the midst of a recruiting hotbed, that be the southern part of the country, which is another factor when determining what's better, this job or that job over there. All of these things come into play. How well can you get talent? How well are you supported? And what's the track record of winning there that allows you to attract a high caliber of assistants and a high caliber of players? Now, that can come down to the individual head coach, but I think historically we've seen that sort of stuff matters. So I've got Alabama number 1. I've got Georgia number 2. I've got Texas at number 3. Did you know that for many, many years, I didn't check for 2023. I don't know if all the numbers are in yet, but Texas is regularly, as an athletic department, the group that leads the entire country in total revenue. You have everything you need to succeed in Texas. There is an argument for Texas to be higher on this list than number 3. There absolutely is. Because Texas is one of the 3 primary recruiting states in the entire country, and they are the biggest brand in that state. And there is no state in the entire country, in this great nation, that takes high school football more seriously than the state of Texas. And they've got a bunch of big-time, blue-chip, 4- and 5-star recruits at all sorts of positions coming out of there every single year. And Texas is the biggest brand. And Steve Sarkisian has built them into what appears to be an annual contender. They were this year. They weren't as good as Washington. But Steve Sarkisian at Texas is very, very good and is capable of winning a national championship there. When you factor in the recruiting, boy, that is a pretty attractive job. They just haven't been making the right hires. Tom Herman wasn't the right hire. Charlie Strong wasn't the right hire. Steve Sarkisian, it's taken some time, but much like Mike Norvell at Florida State, you sometimes need a little bit of time, even at big-time schools like Texas. Where does everybody else fall? What are the rest of the mailbag questions? All of that's coming up on the show after we talk about GameTime, which is just such a great thing because you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see all-in prices, so you don't get slapped with last-minute fees right before you buy. You know what to expect. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know what to expect when you arrive. And you buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, so I have Bama 1, Georgia 2, Texas 3, Ohio State number 4. Did you know that Ohio State regularly, and I believe they did again this year, tops the list of the most watched college football teams in the country? Now, they are not quite in the midst of a recruiting hotbed compared to Texas, Georgia, and Alabama, which is why I have them behind them. I almost put them behind LSU, who's at number 5 for that reason. But the brand of Ohio State is so very strong. And in the transfer portal era, this is why I put Ohio State above LSU, because Ohio State can go out and get big-time players. And they have been, when you have an entire brand for a position as a university, you're doing something right. And you have a propensity to bring in high-level elite talent. And Ohio State regularly puts players in the NFL. Always has a good enough roster to compete. Always has a big-time coach. I think Ohio State is just such a big brand. They're a fantastic job. They've got great fan support, great home field advantage, really hard to win in the horseshoe. It is an immensely difficult thing to do. So I've got Ohio State 4, LSU at 5. I've got LSU at 5, and I think that they've got, you can split hairs really, I think, with the top 5. Once you get outside the top 5, that's when I think there's not a sizable gap, but there's a gap. There's a gap between the top 5 and once you get to the next 5. So at number 6, this is going to surprise some people, but the Florida Gators. Yeah, I've got Florida at number 6. You know why? Because they too are in the midst of a recruiting hotbed. What are the 3 big recruiting states? Texas, Florida, California. And in my view, in that order, which is why I have Florida 1 spot above USC, who's 1 spot above Oregon. Now, there is certainly room for debate as to whether USC is a better job or Oregon. The expectations at USC are very, very high, but the expectations at Oregon aren't exactly low. And so Oregon, I think, gets the nod below USC because USC is in Los Angeles. That's a place where Oregon has started recruiting heavily over the last 5 years, because in the state of Oregon, there are not that many blue chip prospects. There just aren't. There are some good players from time to time. There are not as many. That's why I'd put USC above Oregon. You can recruit at a high level at Oregon because they've got lots of money and they've got a very strong national brand, but it's still harder. You still have to work harder to recruit well at Oregon than at USC. So I've got USC 7, Oregon 8, Oklahoma at 9. That's a blue blood kind of program that's got a close propensity to Texas. I almost had them higher up on this list. Almost did. But just kind of a gut feeling there. And then, because of the financial resources available, Texas A&M. Texas A&M, much like Texas, has got the money, has got the resources, has got everything they need. They got the support. They've got it all. They've got everything they need to win at a high level. They just need the right coach. Texas, for the longest time, just needed the right coach. It's not that Texas wasn't a good job. Texas A&M is a great job. If Mike Elko is as good as we think he is, he could win at a very high level. He could be in the playoff in 2024. But you got to be the right coach. So, 10 best jobs in college football. This is certainly open to debate. I go Bama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, LSU, Florida, USC, Oregon, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. There's an argument for Texas A&M to be 9 and Oklahoma to be 10. Okay. This question from Bud, and I'm sure some people are thinking about this. How will your new Locked On College Football show, congratulations, thank you very much, vary from Locked On Pac-12 in terms of content, mailbag, and focus? The reach of this particular show, in terms of the topics I cover, is going to expand widely. There are going to be a lot of topics I cover on this show that I covered previously on Locked On Pac-12. I might not cover them as often. I might not cover them as in depth because there will be other stories across the entire country to get to opine on, to talk about, to analyze, as I have done for a very long time. But there will be a great deal of crossover topics. Realignment will continue to be a topic on this show when it is in the news. And for anyone wondering, well, are you still going to talk about Oregon State, Washington State? Last time I checked, those two teams are still playing college football. So if you've got a question, send it in. And if I'm able to answer it on the show, then I will do so. And if I can't, then I'll give you an answer via direct message or however you send in the question. But I will encourage, for those who are planning to continue to support Locked On College Football, which I encourage you to do. I'm stoked about it. Talking about everything in the sport is something I'm really, really excited to be able to do while continuing to cover everything out west. But I could expand the coverage of, teams in the Mountain West, for instance, because in the 12-team playoff, group of 5 teams absolutely matter. So those are the sorts of topics that might get more coverage than they did previously on the show. But I'd encourage you to send mailbag questions in via Twitter at smalls_55. Go in there, DMs and mentions wide open. And if I'm not able to get to it on the show, which I might not always be able to do, but I'll definitely continue to do my best to continue answering your questions because I love having that element here on the show. If I'm not able to, then I'll just send you a big long answer. How about that? So here we go from Tyler here. The final minutes of Locked On Pac-12. Just had to let that hang out there for a moment. Spencer, I have several questions for you. What are your thoughts on Kirk Herbstreit's idea of making the Rose Bowl permanent for the college football championship game? What about Rose Bowl renovation? Second question, your thoughts on Kirk Herbstreit wanting to eliminate some of the college bowl games and Urban Meyer pushing back on that idea? I'll go rapid fire here because, frankly, these are short answers. Rose Bowl for the national championship. I'm 1,000% on board. Renovations to it, I don't think it needs to change. I don't see anything on TV that needs to change. I haven't been in the press box before, but seems to be all right, or else there might be a bigger movement for that. Bowl games are not going anywhere. They just aren't. I know that people struggle to see the point or the value in them, but to a lot of programs, a lot of teams and coaches and players, they still have value. And on top of that, they still get viewership, which means they make money. So yeah, they're not going anywhere. The game between the Miami Dolphins and Kansas City Chiefs is exclusively on Peacock. Do you think that is a good or bad idea? Not everyone has Peacock. Do you believe that college football will follow the NFL's lead, putting playoff games exclusively on a streaming service? No, they will not, because there are television contracts. Although the television contracts for the playoff can be renegotiated starting in 2026. There's only a firm deal to broadcast the playoff games for 2024 and 2025, the next 2 college football seasons. They could pick up one, maybe. I don't expect them to do that, though. I think that's the NFL being ambitious. They've always been more, open about putting things behind a paywall. So I'm indifferent to the idea, personally. I have most of the streaming services, so I don't really care. I don't think college football is going to be too heavy on that just yet, but they'll get more involved as time goes on. Michigan State and Washington was only on Peacock, so it's going to be there. A few questions from Bud. 2 questions to end the show. One of the past downsides of success in the Pac-12 was that winning coaches became attractive to the NFL, the school they attended, or perceived bigger programs. What coaches in the current Pac-12 do you think are most likely to move on of their own accord? And with the new conferences in 2024, do you think that ability of the teams to attract high-caliber coaches will be affected? No, the big programs are still going to attract the best coaches. That's not going to change. You're going to have, the Big 2 consolidation with the Big 10 and the SEC, for talent and everything. But you're always going to have that at some level with coaches. I think right now, I talked a lot about Kalen DeBoer earlier today. I wonder if one day Jed Fish goes on to, a bigger job, but Kyle Whittingham will never leave Utah. He'll either coach Utah or retire. I don't think Chip Kelly is going to be able to get a bigger job one day, nor Wilcox, nor Troy Taylor. I don't think Kenny Dillingham will leave ASU. Deion Sanders. I could see Deion Sanders going to Florida State one day. Like if Mike Norvell gets the Bama job, Deion Sanders to Florida State, Get ready for those rumors because they'll sprout up right away. Last question, last topic on Locked On Pac-12. Also from Bud, who sent in a lot of questions. Given that we will likely no longer see a bevy of night games from the ACC or from the teams that move to the Big 10, Big 12, and ACC, do you think Pac-12 After Dark is contagious to these other conferences? And will there be such a thing as Pac-2 After Dark? Could there be a more appropriate topic to end Locked On Pac-12 on than this? I think that the ghosts of Pac-12 After Dark's past will be alive and well. Is that an oxymoron? Kind of. But late night football, it gets weird. It gets weird. Guys sit around all day waiting for the game. It can get funky. And part of the reason West Coast teams are added to these conferences is to give access to the late night television window that previously they didn't have any access to. So finding new markets, new time zones, that's going to continue to be prevalent. And I think that for, the Pac-12 teams, they'll be used to it. We'll see if everybody else is. Locked On College Football starts on Monday. I'm really excited about it. I hope you are as well. I hope to see you over there. And thank you all for making this show what it has been. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I love the Pac-12. Rest in peace, Sweet Prince, the Pac-12. And as we know it, because if that thing starts to rebuild, rest assured that will be covered on Locked On College Football. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time as the host of Locked On College Football. And until then, I hope you all have a most wonderful rest of your day.